Peace, 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 and welcome to the collision where sports and politics collide. I'm Etan Thomas. I have a special guest co-host today. Dave Zirin and Chuck Modiano are not here today. We have had to call a special edition of the collision for everything that's going on. We have Dr. Angel Jones. She's an educator, author, activist, critical race scholar, Nuyorican, and Afro-Latina. How are you doing?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be in this space with you.
Oh no, I've been enjoying following your work on social media for a while now, and you do a lot of great content. So I'm definitely honored that you come and guest co-host with me. So thank you very much. And we have as our guest, she is no stranger to the collision. She's been on a few times. So she retired from the Montgomery County Police Department in Maryland after 28 years, where she became the first African-American woman to attain the rank of captain in the history of the police department of Montgomery County. Her assignment before retirement was director of the Community Engagement Division. We met at Congressional Black Caucus many moons ago, and we was on a panel together, and I leaned over after the panel and I told her, I was like, listen, I've never really heard a police officer talk the way that you talk. Can we exchange information and keep going? She was like, oh yeah, sure. And so we have been working together and supporting each other ever since. I interviewed her for my book, Police Brutality and White Supremacy, The Fight Against American Traditions. And she is absolutely amazing. Captain Sonia Pruitt. How are you doing?
Hey, hi, Dr. Angel.
Hey, it's nice to meet you, sis.
Great. So let's jump right into it. This case with William McNeil Jr. The reason why I called both of you here today, it was such a disturbing video, and for a lot of different reasons. It seemed to me, we've been doing a lot of these programs and teaching young Black men, young brown men, how to engage a police officer, even if they're heightened sensitivity, heightened, everything. How do you de-escalate a situation, and how you have to remain calm, and how you have to keep your hands still, and all of these things. And I'm looking at the video, and it seemed like he was doing all of that, and it still didn't stop the police from bashing his window in and snatching him out and beating him. And there's so much to unpack with this. But let me start with you, Captain Pruitt, and then we could just trade off and asking questions, Dr. Jones. The procedure that is supposed to happen in that situation where you are stopping somebody for, a minor infraction is what it is, whether it's a tail light or what they say his lights were on or off during the daytime. I mean, I don't know why that would cause for all of this, but a minor infraction. What is the proper procedure that is supposed to happen?
Well, the proper procedure is you treat people with dignity and respect. That is the proper procedure. I don't care what is going on, unless there's something that's so there's so much energy and there's violence, and you gotta roll in hot for that. But you're pulling somebody over presumably because their lights were out. Okay, how did we get to the violent part? So this was not just about his lights being out. Let's be clear. Mm-hmm. This was an expectation that you had better do what we say. They didn't care what the reason was that they pulled them over for. You just do what we say. And anytime a person, in particular Black people and brown people, ask questions, then that poses a problem. And now you're not complying. And compliance for us as a people, as a culture, the way that looks goes back hundreds of years to the beginning of slave patrols and things like that, right? We're never able to just be. We're never able to just ask a question. And this young man was clearly confused and probably quite scared. As a matter of fact, in one of his interviews later on, he says that he was scared, that he was nervous, that he was in fear for his life. So where is the humanity that you don't see another person? This is a person. This is somebody's son. and that you would not treat them accordingly. I just said a lot. I have so much on my mind about
No, I definitely hear you. Dr. Jones, go ahead. You can ask the question.
Thank you. First of all, you don't look old enough to have been working anywhere for 28 years, sis. So, amen. I think what I've been thinking about a lot, and folks that we're talking about, that this whole idea of resisting and complying, is there actual definition for what that looks like, or is it this subjective thing that allows white cops to be able to decide what it looks like for us or not?
I believe that is the first time I've been asked that question, and now you really got my gears turning, because what is compliance? And we've got some vague terminology in policing, such as discretion, which they clearly did not use in this case, but it gives officers choices and options, right? Compliance, though, the way I see it and the way I saw it during my 28 years as a police officer, is I say do it and you do it. It's very Jim Crow-ish and black code-ish. Just do what we say. And if you don't do exactly as you're being asked or being told, usually, then you're not in compliance. And what does the word compliance mean? Right? Like, in general, a dictionary definition of compliance. And are we really applying that dictionary definition to what policing is? Or is policing taking it a step further? Is law enforcement taking it further than that? That is a great question. You're going to have me sitting on that for the next couple of days, Doctor.
But aren't you allowed to ask a question? Aren't you allowed to ask, why am I being stopped? Like that. There's certain things that in the guidelines as was doing these different programs, and there are certain things that they were taught that you can ask this. Like, so for instance, do you have a warrant? If a police officer comes to your home, and if they can't just say, open the door and you have to comply, you can ask a question. Do you have a warrant? Or why did you stop me? Or if you're a child, can I wait for my parents or my lawyer to be present? Like, there's certain things that you can legally ask. How does that work with non-compliance versus compliance?
Again, the minute you ask a question now, I told you to do something. Listen, in transformational police leadership or transformational law enforcement leadership, and in this case, we're looking at a sheriff. We haven't gotten to that part of this discussion yet, but he's not a transformational sheriff. But in transformational policing, you encourage people to ask questions. As long as your life is not in danger or the lives of other people around you are not in danger, you don't have nothing but time. Okay, you can stand there and you can have a conversation for as long as you need to if you're really looking at compliance, to have this person comply. Right? Because what you want is for everyone, right? You're supposed to want everyone to go home unscathed and not terrorized at the end of the day, police and the people that they're in contact with.
Right.
So you want to encourage people to ask questions. You want to educate them. And if they ask for a supervisor, then call for a supervisor. But again, we're looking at leadership in this sheriff's department. We've seen his interview, and I'm like, so the stuff just rolls downhill, huh? They are acting that way because they've been allowed to, and that they are working on a very traditional cultural piece that has always been that way. This is how we've always done it. And they don't see any reason to do anything different.
I think all of this just really gets to my heart. Because when we think about our rights, right, and kind of what that looks like, right? So we as Black folks, we have the talk, right, with our kids, but then there are also programs about know your rights, right? But how do we teach our boys to navigate that, right? So like, I'm learning what my rights are, but I can't then advocate for those rights because the negative things are going to happen to us, right? So like, are we setting them up for failure by teaching them rights and teaching them how to advocate for themselves, when we know if they do advocate for themselves, things can go south? Like, how do our kids navigate that?
I have two sons. I found myself that we're the only culture that has to talk, and maybe our Latino brothers and sisters, maybe they have a talk too. But that we are basically the culture that has the talk is just it's mind-boggling, isn't it? So I found myself having this conversation with my sons periodically as they got older and they started to do more things. Like for instance, when they started to drive, and it's a different conversation we're having. When they went off to college, this is a different conversation, a different talk that we're having. So and that we have to do that again is just why. Okay. I want to say to the audience that we want our young people to be empowered. We don't want them to be frightened, which is why we teach them, these are the things that you might want to know. This is why we teach them what their rights are, because, knowledge and education is empowering, isn't it? My students at Howard University, I say that to them almost every class. We are here to teach you to be empowered, to take control of your lives and to save the lives of others. So we want my approach to having that talk when I have it with other communities besides my sons is this is information you need to know, like about the Fourth Amendment, about what happens when you are stopped on the traffic stop. This young man, he had some knowledge, right? But they didn't care about that. But he was still feeling frightened. We don't want them to feel frightened. We want them to have their wits about them. We want them to be able to pay attention to what's going on. What were these officers' names? What kinds of cars were they driving? And by the way, these fools pulled up on the stop with their lights off.
That part.
That's all.
So the hypocrisy. So we don't want them to be scared, even though that's a natural human emotion, right? We want them to be less scared and more knowledgeable, more empowered.
You mentioned the sheriff, and I was watching the press conference, and it was making my blood boil, to be honest with you. And hearing those words out of a Black face stung even more for me. And I know that every time, this has been since high school, like I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm, driving around, I'm stopped by the police. The police steps out and he's a Black police officer. I take a little bit of a sigh of relief. You know what I mean? But then, as you saw, I remember seeing in Boys in the Hood, the Black police officer, remember how he snatched Cuba Gooden out, slammed him on the hood and said, like, I hate you, pulled out his gun. It's like, do something. Like, seeing that element of Black police officers, it hurts my heart. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even know how to put it into words. And that's what I felt watching this sheriff's press conference. Yeah. They say all kinfolk ain't skinfolk. You know what I mean? Like all skinfolk ain't kinfolk. That's what he embodied. And it's and we talked about this a little bit in my interview with you in my book. Mm-hmm. There are an element of police officers, Black police officers in particular, that have to make a decision or feel like they have to make a decision or a choice between if they are going to be Black or if they're going to be blue. And I remember you making that distinction. And the way that you broke that down, honestly, was heartbreaking to hear. And because many, unfortunately, choose blue. Talk about that aspect of it, because you're seeing a lot of harsh reactions and surprise and anger from the sheriff's press conference, and rightfully so. But just explore that aspect for me, if you could.
Oh, we could do this for like hours. But listen, Dr. Angel, Etan and I talked about, as a Black officer, how you're going to come to a choice point. It's unavoidable in your career. And you're going to have to decide which side of this fence I'm going to be on. And for me, it was a very easy decision. I came from a family of, they didn't know they were social activists, but they were. My grandmother, I call her the original Medea. She rode around with a switchblade on the dashboard of her car because she was going to fight somebody. Okay, if you did the wrong thing, you said the wrong thing, and she was all about protecting people. And then I went to Howard University, where the spirit of revolution really hit me in my soul, right? So when it came time for me to make that decision, I was like, oh, I can't be both of these things. I can in my spirit be both of these things, but y'all don't think so. So I'm gonna let y'all just deal with the part of me that you don't care for, that's not fitting within this paradigm that you all have created, that is harmful to my community and other marginalized communities. I made that decision. There's something else going on. Some Black officers don't even know. If you sat them down and told them this is what you're doing, this is how you are putting, how you are contributing to our demise, they don't get it. And then there are some who are making a concerted effort. There's a guy whose name I'm not going to call, but he's on, you might have seen him on YouTube. He's a Black, used to be officer. He is just broke down, a clown, out here telling people the wrong stuff about policing and protecting our communities, right? So you got people like him. Then we have a person in a leadership position. And, I'm on my way to the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives Conference in August. And I'm like, gosh, we're going to Florida. And I'm just wondering if he's going to be there. I hope not, because I don't want to see him. I don't, because I know my mouth. I'll never hear you. I've never heard you cuss a time, but I'm a cussing woman. I will see this brother and some cuss words come out of my mouth. Now, his job is to be a leader of not only the sheriff's department, but the people. The people are telling you that they don't like what they see, and your only response is defensiveness. And whenever I would stop by the police, I would comply, and I wouldn't work here as a Black man. Nobody wants to hear all of that. They saw what they saw, and they're telling you they don't like it. And that is your response. That is problematic in a leadership position. And I also understand one of those officers, not one of the Black officers, one of the officers, I think the officer who broke the window and punched the young man in his face, had complaints. A couple of them internal complaints, and he's still out there on the streets doing what he does. That is the sheriff's responsibility, just like it was the chief's responsibility when Tyree Nichols was murdered. And we're not holding our Black law enforcement executives to account like I feel like sometimes we do our white law enforcement. And it's because in our soul, we want them to be there for our people. But if they are not, then we need to call it what it is and hold them accountable.
There's so many different ways I could go with what you just said. And when I just think about the disappointment we as a Black community feel when we see people like Sheriff Waters. I think that's his name. And to me, like there's so many parts of it, right? So first, that's the fact that him making excuses for this white man's behavior, right? That frustrates me. Him not bringing up the racial implications of what's happening, and then him it wasn't until the end of one of the questions where one of the reporters brought up race, and he shut them down right away and said that he was being incendiary. And I'm just just because you deny the fact that race was a factor doesn't make it true, right? So how are you supposed to approach that? I can't even ask the question without being more and more pissed off, right? But how do we make sure that we're addressing the racial implications of what's happening to our community?
Oh, that's a great question. So let me skip back to compliance real quick, because something I want to point out about compliance that slipped my mind for a second. And this applies to Black officers too, and Asian officers and Latino officers. It's really not, it's about power and control. And when you have unfettered power and control, you have abuse. And power is attractive. All of us, we know what power feels like, and that's attractive. But if you don't have a leader like the sheriff to put it in perspective for the people that they are leading, then it turns into misconduct and abuse, right? As the people who are supposed to be served I contend that it's the hands and the power of the people to make change. The sheriff is always going to stand on what the policy said and what the training. Well, then the public needs to be saying, well, you need to change your policy and your training. By the way, policy and training is only as good as the officers and the sheriff's deputies and the agents who accept it, but you can hold them accountable through that policy and through that training and through those rules and through internal affairs. You can actually hold them accountable. That's why that stuff is there. And they may not like the training, but you had it and you didn't follow it. So a response as a leader, my response to the public would be, you know what? I understand why you are feeling the way that you are. And it is my duty and my job and my mandate to go back and look at our policy and our training to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep our entire community, that means deputies and the people in this community, safe. That's what I would have said. And as far as the race piece, again, I understand what you feel and I understand why you're feeling that way. Okay. I'm not going to dismiss that. I'm not going to minimize it. And our communities deserve peace and safety. And we will look at the race piece. We will. It's amazing to me how people don't want to talk about race. I'm in a police alumni group with the police department that I left. And just last night, I had to go up in there because I go up in there with a couple of knives every once in a while and say, first of all, why are we talking about DEI? What's DEI? I want you to define that for me because I know what it means. I know that it's dog whistle. I know that you're talking about me, but I've never discriminated against anybody that I supervise, especially, right? And the real problem here is that we can't talk about social justice and race without y'all losing your minds because you don't want to talk about it. But that's the very thing you need to be talking about. Listen, one more thing. So I was in charge of a program at Montgomery. I'm not supposed to be saying that. I was in charge of a program where we trained the police in community informed policing. Okay. We did it for 3 years. I thought it was very successful. And then all of a sudden, no program. Because the police department said they're teaching our officers how to be racist. And that's why we can't get anywhere. We're telling you what the community wants to know. What you want to do is tell the community what you want them to know and what you want them to do without listening to what they expect from you. That is and race is like the core issue. Don't want to talk about it because they want to stand on how they feel about racial issues. And that's what's leading us into these tragic events. Right?
Captain Pruitt, you talked about you mentioned holding accountable, and that was a big issue. When everybody started looking at the pattern of police brutality, and then what happens in the aftermath of a police officer maybe being rehired after they're fired or moved to another department and then hired again or something like that. And it always comes back to this topic. And I asked, I interviewed maybe 3 or 4 different police officers, in my book. And I kept asking, how can you ever have police accountability if you're asking the people who are investigating to investigate themselves? Mm-hmm. Like if there's not an outside entity to investigate them. I have kids. If I went to my daughters and they did something wrong, and I said, okay, you go and investigate yourself, and then come back and tell me what you did wrong. Like, would any parent think that is a good strategy? I don't see how we could ever expect accountability in that type of a system. And is it just that, because it's not like I'm the first person who suggested this. Everybody was suggesting accountability, and how do you have an outside entity that's not influenced or connected to the police at all do the investigation? Is it just that they don't want that, or is it like what? Why does that not happen?
So, there's so we all need to sit down for an 8-hour day. So, you've got citizen review boards popping up all over the country, and some of them have some measure of power. some don't. Like when I say that, I mean like subpoena power, the right to make decisions that affect the officer's job, if you will. And some don't. Some it's just they're just looking at the information and drawing their conclusions, which really never go anywhere. I on the one hand, I think that is a great idea to have citizens reviewing these cases. On the other hand, there's always information that's missing. And what's missing for the citizens is, yes, how does a police department work? What does go on the inside, right? In the wonderful county I live in, I applied for the Police Accountability Board and they turned me down. I was like, but y'all don't have nobody on that board who used to be a police officer. So how can you're not informed about how things actually go on the inside, which I think is really important, because I always say you don't know where to put the dynamite unless you know where to put the dynamite. You don't know how this thing is built. You don't know where to put it, right? So you can blow it up and disrupt it. But anyway, but then there's also, I think, a role for internal investigations. I worked in internal affairs. I thought we had a very strong team. And even when we disagreed, I felt that they did what was right for the community. I think that's changed now. Just recently, one of the sergeants in internal affairs at Montgomery County Police was arrested for child pornography. And we got him in there looking at officers' cases. How did he get in there? When I was there, we turned him down, but now he's in. So I see what the public is saying. I feel like I don't know what the right answer is to that. I'm still thinking on that. I do, though, again, appreciate having the community drive what they think is right or wrong, review these cases, but they need to have some power behind it. And they also need to have somebody who they can consult with, who's going to tell them the nuance of policing and law enforcement. That was a long way to get to that piece.
No, I got you.
So sticking with the idea of accountability, right? I want to know what that looks like, right? So, for example, as an educator, when I worked in middle schools, I used to look at the discipline records and see the disproportionality of, white kids getting sent to the principal's office versus black kids, and then we were able to call out certain teachers and based on their behavior. Does something like that happen within the departments for y'all? Like, are people evaluated every year and we get to see their arrests and which ones are black and kind of, is there some type of evaluation process for officers?
Well, that's going to vary from department to department. There's like 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States. It's going to vary from department to department. It's going to vary from state to state, county to county. What the collective bargaining agreements, what the unions, it's so many things. But in a perfect world, there are processes set into place to discipline an officer. And the part I don't like is, how many times does an officer get to do something like a Derek Chauvin? How many times can this person have a complaint and they still be allowed to work as a police officer? How many times? That is where we're falling short. And we're also falling short, again, with leadership. I'm going back to the sheriff. I'm like, this dude has already tried this case in his head. He's already adjudicated it administratively. They didn't do anything wrong. He should have just complied. Yeah. And how dare you bring up race? The public's not going to get what they want in this case. I don't think. They've already said that these officers are not going to be charged criminally. So the only thing that's left is a civil suit, right? Does that hold an officer accountable? Well, yeah, if the judge allows for that suit to go forward, for that lawsuit to go forward. So how do we hold officers accountable? We're going to have to keep pushing. Here we are in 2025. How many years have we been in this country? Right. But we can't let up. We have to keep pushing. So accountability looks like actually holding officers accountable and not just giving lip service about bad apples. What's a bad apple, by the way? I've been asking every time I get a chance. I ask a police officer who wants to argue with me what a bad apple is. Because these apples are just sitting in the barrel, just making all the other apples rotten. What is a bad? What kind of behavior will arise to the level where you say, as an officer, they need to go? Just child pornography? That's the only one? What about murder?
Right.
Chauvin, there was enormous support in the law enforcement community for him. He was a murderer, or is a murderer. So, Dr. Angel, I know what it's supposed to look like, but it doesn't look that way yet.
So a lot of the public view about police officers is that they operate as a gang. Not that they're there to help you, but there to be enforcers, or do they care how they're viewed? And I know it's not, I don't want to make a sweeping statement, but it doesn't seem like there's any type of hesitancy, even if they know they're on camera, even if they know that because they know all they're going to have to say is, I was in fear for my life, and then everything is kind of wiped away and everything is excused. Like, do they care how because there's a lot of talk in 2020 after George Floyd about community and police officer relations, and they wanted to increase the trust of both sides, and there are these programs everywhere, and they had the police officers there, the community people there to see each other. Like, there was all of that, but it doesn't seem like that's really a concern about how they're viewed by the way that they're operating. And I don't want to make a sweeping generalization, but when you keep seeing videos after videos of something like we just saw, it's kind of hard not to, and it be excused. It's different if it was condemned. If it was like, no, this is not who we are, this is not what we represent, this is not, but that's not what happened when the sheriff got on the mic. So how do you change the view of police officers when you're seeing in reality the view play out in real life?
You have to force them. And when I talked about the training that I led, it was mandated. It was like, you're gonna have to take this training, until it wasn't anymore. It was mandated until they were like, well, we're not gonna do it anymore. Who's gonna do anything about it? And no one has done anything about it, right? And that goes back to that accountability piece. And so, yes, police, I think that law enforcement does care about how people see them, but it is I have a degree in psychology, but I'm not a psychologist. It's like a really weird, we care only to the extent that we want you to see us the way we want you to see us. Not we care enough to ask you, well, how do you see us, and what do you think will make things better in our relationship? That's not a question. That's rarely and when I say that, I'm generalizing. There are plenty of law enforcement agencies across this country who embrace transformation. Even in this time right now in this country, there are plenty of really brave leaders, and they're not black, they're white, and they're like, we ain't doing this. Okay, but just not enough, because it only takes one agency to have a bunch of knuckleheads like in Jacksonville, Florida, to injure someone or even take someone's life. Right. So yes, they do care, but again, we care that we want you to see us the way we want you to see us, and then we're the heroes. It's what drives, like, you ever have something like a school shooting, you watching the video of the person who's in charge of the police department, and instead of focusing on, we just had some young people who have been killed, they want to tell you how brave their police officers were for running in. But that's what they're supposed to do, and we can talk about that bravery later, even give them awards and salutation. But right now, we're talking about this tragedy that just occurred.
Right.
Because it's a lot of ego. We want to be seen, but you're not that thing. And when people tell you you're not that thing, why aren't you responding to that? Yeah.
I think part of why we view the cops in a negative way, I think we don't see enough times where cops are challenging each other and checking each other, right? So we think about this idea of being complicit, right? And especially when Black officers are complicit, it really burns my biscuits. Like, you can be Black and still uphold white supremacy, right? And all of those ideals. Have you seen officers check each other, right? Like, is there some reason why we should believe that there are cops that are in there checking each other to make sure that they don't get to go out in the fields and then kill our men?
Yes. And you know what, Angel, There's so many out there doing the work. Not enough of us. And I want to be mad at my brothers and sisters who are not standing for our communities in a way that will keep everyone safe. But they're scared too. And I talk a lot about humanity, and that's a very human emotion, to be afraid. And so people may ask, well, why are you in there if you're afraid? That's a great question. You'd have to ask individual officers that question, right? I could not just watch what was going on and pretend like I did not see it. It just wasn't part of my spirit. So we have organizations like the National Black Police Association. We have the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers. The Hispanic what do they call it? HINALEA, Hispanic Law Enforcement, National Hispanic Law Enforcement Association. We have affinity groups. And those affinity groups stand for just the things that we are talking about right now, but it's just not enough. And then I just talked about NOBLE. I'm going to their conference, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. And one of my greatest complaints about NOBLE is we need to be a stronger voice, and we need to be standing in front of these problems, not behind them, not straddling the fence, not putting out press releases that sound real nice and sweet and kumbaya. And we're not in a kumbaya moment, by the way. This is not a unifying place that we're in this country right now, or globally, because this is a global issue. A whole nother 2 hours we could talk about. So yeah, we got so much work to do, Angel. It's scary, and it's frustrating. But there are people doing the work. And then there are other organizations where they're not law enforcement, but they're doing this work, like National Strategies for Justice. I mean, there's plenty of people who are doing the work, but on the inside, we need more brave people. They don't want to join the police department because they're like, I don't want to deal with that. But when they get there, it can be overwhelming. Those police officers, the Memphis 5 and the Tyree Nichols case, for instance, they got absorbed into the power dynamics. And when that happened, and I was interviewed about it, I'll never forget this day. I was asked the question, why do you think that they did that? And y'all, I couldn't get my answer out. I'm tearing up now. I knew the answer to that question about the power, and that we can succumb to that as well, right? We're still human beings, and just because they're Black, right? They're human. But it was hard to talk about, because all I could see was a young man, like everybody else's young man, like my son's, like like your son, Etan, and your daughters. That was what I felt in my heart, and it broke my heart. And then I had a conversation yesterday about the chief, who's still the chief there. She's a Black woman, and they were like, "Well, did you see her take responsibility?" No, I didn't. I saw her say she was disturbed by it, and that's appropriate. But the reality is, how did we get to a place where a group of officers had so much autonomy and lack of supervision that they killed someone? How did we get to that place? I want her to answer that question.
And it's I know we got to wrap up here in a minute, but it's tough, because there is a fear that non-Black people don't understand when you come across a police officer, when we come across a police officer, and there's, I've done nothing wrong. I'm driving, a police officer comes by me, and it's like my whole body tenses up. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm driving to, you know what I mean? I've nothing wrong. But they don't understand that feeling. When I came and spoke at your event for the Black Police Officers Association, the reason why my daughters were with me is because they were scared for me to go by myself. That's why they came. They weren't supposed to come. You know what I mean? There's no reason for them to come with me.
And I'm glad that you brought them, by the way.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And my daughter Imani, she was like, wait, you can't go there by yourself. And, it's something that white people don't understand, and they can't fathom. So they don't understand what seeing a case like this where the police officer bashes in the window and grabs him, how traumatizing that is. And but the when you see a lot on social media, something like, well, we don't have to share this, what do you call it? Tragedy, like tragedy porn. I'm trying to think of the phrase that they use. And I was like, yeah, but the
trauma
porn. Yeah, right.
Porn,
and what the thought is that, remember when Emmett Till was killed, murdered and dismembered and, mutilated, and the mother said, okay, I'm going to have an open casket so all of America can see what they did.
Yes.
That is the thought with some of these cases, but it doesn't seem to be moving mainstream America. George Floyd did, for whatever reason, that one case really struck a nerve with mainstream America. I don't know if it was because of COVID and everybody was home, and I don't know what, but those cases happen all the time. So it's a situation where it doesn't necessarily move the needle for mainstream America when it doesn't hit home for them. And so it's hard to even have the discussion with a non-Black person about a police case because it doesn't hit the same for them.
I don't even have those discussions unless the person is really trying, I really want to know what it is that I'm missing. Because most people just want to argue with you or try, they just want to argue. I'm not arguing with you. I'm going to cuss you out, but I'm not going to argue with you. And if you want to really know, and I'm really not in a place except in my classroom where I feel like I should really right now in this moment be on the education tip, except for the community, the community at large. But I'm not here for you to come at me talking about, well, I don't get it. Explain to me. You don't really want to know. There's plenty of books. There's videos. There's plenty of ways you can educate yourself. But I relived this trauma. You and I talked about trauma this morning, Etan. I'm not trying to, I'm only doing it when I know that the people who are listening really, really, really want to hear.
Right.
That's it. Otherwise, we just spinning our wheels and re-traumatizing ourselves over and over.
That's true.
And so I don't know where we go from here. I don't know what's going to, I think this pushed the envelope a little bit in Florida. The comments I've been seeing online, most people are like, what in the world? You cannot justify this. And I'm glad that he's still here with us so he can tell his story. But I don't know what it's going to, my thought, I'm not going to say that out loud. I'll tell you in private. But yeah.
We've
been fighting for a long time.
Seeing him when he had the press conference, trying to address the crowd and saying that he was scared, and then seeing him get choked up, and not be able to, that it hurt my heart because he's traumatized, and now from this point on, he has to live with that trauma that those police officers inflicted on him. And then the sheriff said that they did nothing wrong. And that
is allowed to be human. That's the part. That humanity piece is certainly missing. I'm sorry for interrupting you. The humanity of us. That is a young man. I don't care if he had weed. I don't care if he had a knife in his car. I told you my grandma used to ride around with one of hers.
Right.
So I'm not concerned. I want to know how they got from a pretextual stop, which is what it was. They were really fishing. Did they know his license was already suspended? And if so, why didn't they tell him that? We're pulling you over and asking you out of the car because your license is suspended. Some of my colleagues that I've worked with, we had a discussion about this yesterday, and we all agreed that there were a gazillion ways we would have handled that situation and had him get out of the car if we needed to, without it going down the way that it did. We didn't need to break no windows. We didn't need to punch him upside the head. And damn it, I'm mad because the sheriff denied that was a sucker punch. Come on. Are we serious right now? I'm sorry.
No.
It's just too much. It's too much. And I'm tired of, I want to have conversations because we have moved the needle, not have conversations about these same issues and constraints and compliance, lack of compliance. I don't want to have those conversations. I want to talk about the good stuff. That's where I want to get to. And it's taken a long time for us to get there.
Yeah, definitely, it definitely is. So let me just ask one final question. And I know you kind of answered where do we go from here, but it's a question that you have to ask because you have to be able to we have to be able to tell the community how to proceed now. You know what I mean? I mean, you have this image that we've seen for the past few days, and that image is stuck in all, now, especially with social media, it's stuck in our head. Where do we go with this right now?
Yeah. So I created the Black Police Experience so that I could educate the community on just this thing. What do I do in my community so that I can address this issue? I remember once I had an interview. Oh, we were at the DNC one year, and I was on a panel with somebody who he's a data guy. He collects information, and they were mad at me because I said the community needs to tell the police department what they want. It's our law enforcement belongs to us. It does not belong to law enforcement. So we get to tell. It's just like we tell anybody else what we want. This is what I want. Mm-hmm. And so I educate on how to do that wherever you are. And I recently created a piece. I just want everybody to know this is really important to me. I created a training for Black women in particular in law enforcement who are working on the inside, how to navigate that, how to get promoted, how to take care of their health and well-being. I'm a 2-time breast cancer survivor. I swear I think it was because of the stress I was under inside the police department. So it's important that we address our Black officers too. Tell them how to survive so maybe they will stand, right? That's the job. To educate people, tell them what they need to know to push the envelope with their law enforcement. And a lot of communities across the country are doing just that. Some of them not so good, and some of them doing a great job of it. And we need to learn from them. So we don't just hang and they're just gonna be who they are. No, we don't do that. We keep pushing.
Keep pushing. Well, you know how I feel about you as far as the level of respect. Because from the time that I first met you, it was like I haven't really heard any police officers ever talk the way that you talk, and your openness, and even to tell that something affects you where this is a regular emotional reaction to something that is as tragic and horrific as it is. Sometimes when you see police officers speaking, there's such coldness. Like there's no, like they're talking about a robot or a machine or a video game. Like it's not about a human being. And you have always had that human element to it. And that's what's missing a lot of times. They started doing a lot of, I went to one with Valerie Castile, which is Philando Castile's mother in Virginia. And it was this big, and a lot of the police officers were straight, but there's this one. And he's sitting there and he's all staunch and he's all everything like this. And he's sitting back and he's answering and he's talking about all these different things. And it's like, you can tell that he doesn't care about the people from a humanistic standpoint.
Yes.
And that's so problematic to have that person as a person that you think of your son is going to encounter if he gets stopped by the police. So we definitely have a long way to go and a lot of work to do. But
how do you teach humanity, right?
It's not something that you're supposed to have to teach. And so
you don't hire them though if you can't, when you're hiring people.
Yeah. You would think that there's some kind of screening process where if you don't think that someone, I don't know, and that goes to a whole different process of why certain people are even allowed to be police officers.
That's right. Another whole 2 hours.
Oh, a whole 2 hours. But hey, much respect to you for all the work that you do, Dr. Jones. Much respect to you as well. And we just got you said we got to just keep pushing. So thank you for coming on The Collision with Sports and Politics.
Always a pleasure. Anytime.
Always a pleasure. Definitely. So much respect to both.
See you later, Dr. Jones. Nice to meet you.
It's so nice meeting you.
All right.